about? Or based on reading these questions, what must it be about? Dylan, do you have any of them? So unit 5, a car that was originally sold for $18,000 loses a fifth of its value each year. The equation 1,000 times 3 to the power of t represents the population of fish in the surprise. I'm assuming surprise pond. Year since 2014, when the fish in the population lake was surveyed. So what type of graph would all of these give you? What did you say, Taylor? Increasing or decreasing? Would it be in a straight line? Like y equals mx plus b? Would it be a straight line? Allison, close your phone. Okay. Well, a few things you could do to figure that out. You could graph it and see how that graph looks. But what type of functions did we talk about in unit 5? There's really only a few that we talk about all year. What was that, Kaylin? So no, that was not unit 5. Y equals mx plus b was like units 1 through 3. Maybe even 4 a little bit. But unit 5 was about what? Based on these phrases. What was that, Gabe? Okay, so it was Chris that said it. Exponential functions. So maybe write that down in the margin. Unit 5 was all about exponential functions. So things that are growing or decaying at an exponential rate. All right, so multiplying each time to get to the next number. All right, the one that was requested was from the second choice, part 3. But really, I'm going to tell you right now, when you get your final exam, do all of it. Some of you, like, it really makes a difference in your grade. It could be the difference from you having to come to summer school or you having to retake an entire year. All right, others of you, it might just bump you up a letter grade. But the one that was requested was this one. So for t equals -3, is the fish population more or less than 1,000? How do you know? So we do have a given equation here. There is a t in it. So first you have to see what that value is. I think that probably would be the easiest. You could also figure it out conceptually. Because is this growing or decreasing, this fish population? All right, it's growing. How do you know, Gabe? I agree with you that it's growing. What part of it tells you that? What? So 1,000 tells you that? Is that what you said? So the 1,000 just tells me what I started with. Okay, so this is telling me that we started with 1,000 fish. So again, exponential functions, we're in this form. A times b to the x, right? Bringing back memories. A stands for what? Starting amount. So that's why the 1,000 is my starting amount. All right, I do agree that it is growing. How do you know? What part of the equation would tell you that? It's multiplying by what? 3. And 3 is, it is positive, yes. I think all the numbers when we do our exponential functions are positive. But what about b makes it that it's growing? Alright, then. How do you know? Based on the B, that it's growing or decaying? No, they'll all be positive in this. Like, for example, in this problem, that's still a positive number, but that doesn't mean it's growing. Try again. Allison? Well, in exponential functions, it'll always be multiplied. So like, it's always A times B. But B, depending on what it is, can tell you if it's growing or decaying. You guys remember? Well, the exponent just tells me how much time passes. So X is for time. What'd you say, Kaylin? Okay, so yes, B can be 1 plus or minus R. In short, B, if it's greater than 1, it's growing. If it's smaller than 1, or basically between 0 and 1, so like a decimal between 0 and 1. Let me put that here. Then it's decaying. All right, so since it's multiplying by 3 is what tells you that it is growing. So that's how you can tell whatever I plug into T, if it's like a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, it'll all be getting bigger than the 1000. Now, what if I plug in a negative for the T? If T is years since 2014, then what would T equals -3 be talking about? The time when. Three years before 2014. If T is years since 2014, then T equals -3 would be 3 years before. So it's 3 years before 2014. Okay, good. So that kind of helps us with this. So we know that 1000 is our initial amount. Without calculating, and then of course you can calculate on your test. But without calculating, would you estimate that the number of fish is going to be more or less than 1000? Well, since it's years before they started measuring, I would think that it's going to be less because that was before they started measuring the 1000. So yeah, the population is growing. But if we're measuring prior to when they started, which was that the 1000 fish, then it's probably going to be less than 1000. All right, but you can definitely verify with calculator. So because it is before 2014. All right, but again, put in your calculator. All right, 1000 times 3 to the -3rd power. Is that more or less than 1000? So they're estimating that there was around 37 fish in the year 2011. If we keep increasing year by year, it's growing. And then at year 0, so where they started measuring in 2014, it was at 1000. And then it keeps going in that rate. All right, questions on that? Okay, any other questions from any other part of the review? Unit 7? This one? Okay. So unit 7, the one we just finished, was all about what type of function? Quadratic functions. So, and so was unit 6, by the way. We just kind of focus on different parts. So this one on the left, and this would be a great way to make up your points if you didn't get points when I came around to check or didn't get full points. Writing down what we're doing. All right, but the solutions to this equation are 1, 6, and 5, 6. When we say solutions, what do we mean? The values for the x that make it true. All right, so we're saying that our x's are those. It says show how to find these solutions by completing the square. So if on your final exam, you do any other method other than completing the square, I can't give you full points. So completing the square was the one with all those really specific steps. You guys remember what the first step is? Okay, so first step is to rewrite it to where it's equal to C. It's the only method that doesn't want it equal to 0. So if it is, then you need to make it to where it's equal to the C, the constant. What's my constant in this one? 5. And how do I cancel it out? Subtracting it would cancel it out. If I divided, that would just make it 1, not 0. So I wanted to move to the other side. And it does that because whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other. So if I wanted to cancel on the left, I have to make it become 0 and then do the same on the other side. All right, you guys remember what the next step is? Half of B. Then what do you do? Square it and then add to both sides. So it's the one with all those really like specific steps. So what is my B value? Don't say it out loud. Cohen, what's my B value? Okay, can you examine this formula? And compared to this one, what number is in the B position? Second. B is always in front of the X. So if there's nothing in front of the X that was not written, what is it? 1. And then since it's a minus in front of the X, it's a -1. So then, let's see. Jessica was half of -1. Half being -1, what would be half of that? All right, don't overthink it. Yep. -0.5. For these purposes, I am gonna leave it in fraction form. It is -0.5. I'm gonna leave it as -1/2. All right, so you don't overthink it. Half of -1 divided by 2 is -1/2. And then you square it. What is it squared? 1/4. So -1 squared is 1, 2 squared is 4. So, and that's what we're adding to both sides. Now, if you're like, I don't like dealing with fractions and stuff, I get it. You can use Desmos to do some of the math for you. You just have to know how to type it in. So then on the left side, this creates a perfect square trinomial. We'll factor that in the next step. On the right, even me as a math teacher would prefer to just use a calculator for that part. That's what I'm going to do. It's -5 over 36 plus 1/4. And it gives me a decimal. Probably don't want to use a decimal for this problem, at least not until the very end. So you're going to press this fraction into decimal button, and it gives me the simplified fraction, which is 1/9. Any questions on that? Okay. So then step 3 in completing the square is to do what? Factor that perfect square trinomial. And if you're like, oh my God, that sucks. It usually ends up being whatever half of b was. All right, but if you don't believe me, you can set up your diamond. At the top would be 1/4. At the bottom is -1. What multiplies to 1/4, but adds to -1. The -1/2, whatever half of b was. Okay, so notice that starting this year, I've had the past 3 years not noticing that, but that's what it is. Questions on that? So then step 3, we factored. The reason why we want that to happen is so that we can write it as a perfect square, like in this format. And then step 4, do you guys remember that step? Simplify. So what's the perks of having it in this step? Yes, we are going to simplify. I'm going to actually put solve for x. All right, the perks of having it in that format, using this method, is to get just one x in the problem. That way I could actually isolate the x versus doing quadratic formula versus doing factoring. So then get the x alone. What's farther, the 1/2 or the 2? Also, I wrote this on. It could be. All right, but what's opposite of squaring? Whatever you do on one side. What's the square root of 1/9? One-third is correct, and you can use a calculator for that. I'll even show you. But really, when you square root a fraction, you're square rooting the top and the bottom of that fraction. So square root of 1/9 is 1/3, right there. All right, so then on the right, I have 1/3. On the left, oh, and it should be a plus or minus 1/3, don't forget that. All right, let's solve for x and make sure to solve for both cases. When you square root, you have a plus or minus. And then opposite of minusing 1/2 is adding 1/2. And whatever you do on one side, do to the other. So then I get x equals, and it'll be positive 1/3 plus 1/2, and you can use your calculator for that part. And then negative 1/3 plus 1/2. So we're separating that plus or minus. And then I would prefer using my calculator, so that's what I'm gonna do. I get 1/3 plus 1/2. So to put fractions in the calculator, probably best using parentheses. All right, and that is 5/6 as a fraction, which is one of the answers it said it would be. All right, so then 5/6 is what we get from adding the first one. And then when adding the second one, the only difference is now it's a negative 1/3. Then that becomes a positive 1/6. Now, usually when I grade your constructed response finals, I make each question out of 10 points. So even if you're stuck, I still want you to try this on your final exam, even if you can only do some of the steps. So even if you could just rewrite it, probably give you at least like 2 points there. If you can identify what half of b is, square it, add it to both sides, get another like 3 points, and so on. So again, attempt every problem, because it would only benefit you. It would be like extra credit if you got more than the total amount right. All right, we may have time for one more depending on how long it is. Any requests? Unit 6, the first one. Okay, so unit 6 is also about quadratics. This one, the expression 16t² represents the distance in feet an object falls after t seconds. The object is dropped from a height of 502 feet. I'm gonna have to double check this one, because I'm wondering if there should be a negative there. So, we'll see. So what is the height in feet of the object 5 seconds after it is dropped? Is the problem with this one that it's not negative? Cause I might have to go back and check. Cause it's almost always a negative 16 x squared. So if it's a positive. Yeah, let's table this one for tomorrow. I think I'm gonna have to make sure that wasn't a typo. Cause there's no way you could drop something and it goes in this shape. There's no. Alright, so don't lose your paper. We'll do the same thing a little bit tomorrow. Tomorrow you'll find out who you're partnered with. I already made that list and what your guys' topic will be. I'll also give you time tomorrow to start planning and preparing for that.